So I'm going to go over basically some of the basics about Git. So I'm going to start from nothing because presumably you already know some stuff, but I think it's better if I just start from scratch. So what I'm going to do here is...
Interrupt you. Could I write it? Start recording, okay?
Could you write it?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what?
Thank you. What about camera? Okay, I think it's writing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first of all, I'm going to create a repo.
Mm-hmm.
To demonstrate, I'm just going to call this, I already made one called example repo. Example repo, there we go. And create. So then I'm going to basically make this in my local environment, so example repo. This is just how I do it. Obviously you can clone straight from there, but once there's anything on there, but I'm going to do example repo and I'm going to make a file called file.txt. So the way Git works, now again I'm aware you probably already know some of this, but the way Git works is we basically have a number of stages in Git. So we have our working directory, which is what we have right now, because right now we have, I need to get this up side by side. Git state background. Oh, I see, they're on different. Here we go. Sorry, I've got different workspaces going on here. There we go. So right now we have a Git repository. Actually, it's not quite a Git repository yet. I will first need to go into it and do git init. Now we have a Git repository. We have it in the working state. So we don't have anything staged, we don't have anything commit, and we don't have anything on the remote. So in order to basically add files, we need to stage them. And in order to stage files, we can see in this file, let's make a file called touch file.txt. So now we can see we have this one file, and if I do git status, this is a very useful command, you can see that I have nothing tracked, but there's something that's untracked. So what I will do is I will add that file.txt. And then if I do git status again, we see that I have changes registered because I've now flagged that I want Git to track file.txt. So in order to get that onto the repo, first of all what I need to do is whenever I do a commit, I am adding anything that I've staged onto sort of my local repository ready to be pushed. So I'm going to initial commit. So I've now commit the changes that I've added. So if I do git status again, we'll see there's nothing to commit because everything that I've staged is now add. But if I were to create a new file called touch file doom.txt, and then I would add that, and then do git status, I now do have something to add, so I'll also add that. So we'll add. So when I do tech-m, that's just for message, because otherwise I have to go through using a file editor. But here, when I do tech-m, I just automatically input the message. So the message here is file, added. Okay, so now this is us using Git on our local repository. So if I do git log, we can actually see our changes here. So we can see our commit history and when we made them. And now we want to try to get this online. So how do we do that? Well, what we have to do is I'll have to go back to my example repo. And let me just put this up here. So I then have to add a remote. The remote I'm adding is origin. So I'm going to full screen this. Actually. So now we can see we've gone through the working phase. When we've added it, we've staged this change. And then we've commit the stage changes. So now in order to get this onto our remote, we need to push it, but in order to push it, we need to specify what our remote is. So we're going to do that now. So just copying that from the GitHub page. Then I can do git push u origin master. And I've now specified my changes, and I've specified my remote rather, and I've pushed. So pushing will take all of the commits and put them onto master. So basically, there's two versions of the Git history. There's my local Git history, and then there's the master Git history. And so my local Git history was ahead. My local Git history, sorry, it's inverted on my screen. My history was ahead, and then I pushed it, and now its master is in sync with my local. So pushing and pulling is like, pushing is synchronizing your remote environment with your local environment, and pulling is the opposite. So everything's pretty simple so far, but now, what if we get into some trouble here? So I will refresh this. And for the sake of the example, I will make some changes to this file, and I will say changes from master and from remote. I'll commit those. So in order to get those changes, I can just pull, which is simple enough. You know, we're going through the happy flows right now where nothing goes wrong, right? And then my branch will, and then we can see which files have been updated. Now let's say I go into file to .txt, and then I say changes from local. So I'm going to make the change on local, and I'm going to add file 2, and then commit file 2. I'm in nano. I don't need to, sorry. Commit, so committing file 2. But then, let's say I also make changes on master, on the remote. So I also add here changes from remote 2, and I commit these. Now, the issue is when I try to pull, there's conflicts, because there's two versions of the code. There's the version on my local environment, and there's the version on my master environment. Now sometimes this is fine, because if I make a change in file 1 on master and file 2 locally, when I merge them, I haven't changed the same file or the same line, so they can just merge perfectly. But in this example, and this is where most people run into problems with Git, I think, is we've got different versions on our local environment and on master. And when I try and pull, it won't let me do it. Well, it will let me do it, but it results in, well, I'll show you. So now we can see this kind of confusing thing. So we've got these different situations in which we've got these different changes. Now, what we have to do here is we have to manually choose what we want to do. So do we want to keep changes from remote or keep changes from local? So what we have to do is manually edit this ourselves. And changes from remote too. So I'm writing that file, then I'm going to add it. I don't need to add it now, it's already there. So if I do git status, we'll see both modified. So I do need to add this because there's been a change. So git add file 2, status, git commit fixed merge conflict. And we can just push. So now this is how we're resolving this conflict between different versions of master and remote and local. Okay, so any questions so far before I go on?
No, I think no questions.
Okay.
I would like to see the branch.
Branching. Okay, we can do branching. So now let's say I'm working on an experimental feature, sorry. So I want to work on file free, and I don't want people from the master branch to have any problems with this. So what I can do is I can do git branch, then I'm going to call this file free branch. So just creating the branch doesn't do anything yet, because if I do git status, I'm still on branch master. You see this? Right? So in order to move on to that branch, I need to do git checkout file free branch.
Here I have a question.
Yep.
You're creating this branch in your local repository?
Yes.
Okay.
So if we want to get this branch onto the master, we need to push. Because pushing is synchronizing the remote repository with our local repository. So let's make some changes here. Let's do what I promised, then file free.txt. Git commit. File free changes. So now we've got the changes on. So if I do, you don't worry about this command, but master. We can see that I've created a new file. That's the different. So this is our local, and I can also do git diff origin /master. So the origin here refers to the remote, which is the same. But so if I could just, for the sake of file free changes, we can see this is the file and these are the changes. This is the difference between the two branches. So now everything is completely isolated. So if I go here, we see that none of the changes are there, right? We see that. Because even though we've made the branch, we haven't synchronized it. So what I can now do is, did I commit this? I did not commit this yet. File free changes. Oh, I haven't added it. Add file free. Okay, so now if we now I will push this, and I need to set the upstream. So fortunately it gives us the command here. So set upstream origin, which is our remote, and then file free branch. So in the future I can just do git push, but in this instance I'm setting the upstream. So now when I go to master, we see that when I refresh, we'll still only see these two files. But if I look at branches, I can now go to the file free branch, and I have all three files. So when things are stable in our branch free and we think we're ready to merge back into master, what we do is we can check out master again. So we're moving the head back to master. And then we can do git merge file free branch. Then if I look at my changes, git diff, so this is essentially getting the difference, origin /master. I can see that these are the same difference we saw earlier when we were looking at our changes on the branch. So we've taken all of the changes from that branch, we put them back on here. So if we look at our history, the git history now includes all of the changes from origin, from the file free branch. So you can see these changes, file free changes, file free. So this is where origin master is at. And then these changes have been taken from this branch. So what we need to do is we need to do git commit merged master with file free branch. Oh, I just need to push. Oh, of course, I don't need to commit because the commits have been taken from the other branch. So now when I push, it will synchronize the history of the remote with my local branch. So I go back and I check here and voila, master now has file free, and file free branch is now redundant because if you look here, they both have the same number of commits.
Mhm.
So, does this clear up your concerns or any other questions?
So you create the branch locally,
Yes.
and by the stream command, you create the branch remotely.
Yes.
Yes?
The set upstream,
Okay.
yes.
I think that I'll try to repeat that.
Yeah. So fortunately, it gives you the command, as you can see up here. Set upstream origin file free branch. So
I saw that on my screen, but I had problems with it. But
yeah.
I created the branch on remote, and then no,
Oh, I
okay,
see. You created it on
probably.
remote and then yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. Something else I think might be useful because this is where we get a little bit further down the line. We get into more merging issues. Now, I think a really cool command is called git stash. So what git stash does is it will, if I'm working on, am I on master now? Let's check. So let's say I'm working on something and I don't want to make a branch because it's not necessary, but I also want to keep my changes. So let's quickly make some changes here. So we should always use meaningful commit messages because then when we're looking back, it's easier to snipe one out. This is more complicated Git stuff, but you can get into things where you're picking out specific commits and moving them over or moving backwards in time so you can test something to see if it was working earlier. But right now, let's just, so changes, new changes. So this is not great commit naming, but okay, git commit, blah, 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 and then, oh no, I don't want to commit those. So this is something else that's used. I don't know, maybe this is too much information, but you can also reset your changes. So if you commit something you don't want to, you can reset. So now, do you see I commit that earlier? Let me just repeat that. So I commit the changes, then I do git status, and I have nothing to commit, no new changes. But then I reverted my commit basically. I said I want to git reset, but I want it to be soft. And so I'm basically saying, put me back to origin master, get rid of my commits, but keep my changes locally. And so now when I do this again, you can see I have changes. So let's make a change on master in file 2 as well. So I want to try and git pull, and it's running into an error again. But I don't want to get rid of my changes, and I don't want to merge them, because let's say in this example, I know it's very trivial here, but let's say there's actually loads and loads of lines that have changed and it'll be really complicated. What I can do is I can store my changes locally by doing git stash. Now, what this does is it basically adds them to a stack that's held internally on my system, and then when I do git pull again, it will merge. So my changes are still safe. If I do git stash list, you can see stash 0, work in progress on master, file 3 changes. So I can actually then try and git stash pop. So it's a stack, so pop gets the top item from the list. Then there's a conflict, but I can get rid of mine. They are merged. But I think git stash is a very useful thing, because if you're having these conflicts and it's constantly saying, oh, there's a conflict and you don't see where it is or what's going on, you can just save all of your local changes safely in the stack, and then pull master, and then you can see what's going on, what the changes are, because otherwise it might get really messy with these conflicts. Okay. Is there anything else?
I think no, so far.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think this was good to go over the sort of fundamentals, and there's more complicated, interesting stuff you can do later on that maybe we'll go into when it's necessary. And I think that's really good for helping with your productivity as well. And companies will kind of, a lot of companies will kind of look for that kind of stuff. So for
Thank
now,
you.
let's leave it. But cool. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.